Like most devs, I love a good dark mode, but you know what I don't love? I don't love the flash of white screen of death as it loads in your theme and then finally applies the dark mode. How can we avoid all of that? That's what I want to show you today. We're going to set up an entire theming system. We're going to start by actually adding the CSS, then adding the HTML, loading everything with JavaScript, and finally we're going to store the user's preference in cookies so that when we fetch that with Astro server-side rendering, we can actually embed the theme directly in the returned HTML. Now, just a quick note before we get started, and that is that we're going to just use the default blog template from Astro. So you can see here, you can just install it. I am using TypeScript just to show you how that works here, but you don't have to necessarily to follow along with this tutorial. You ready? Let's jump in. Hey, what's up? My name is Chris, and welcome to Coding in Public. All right, so you can go ahead and grab the code in the description if you want. In fact, you probably should start with that blog template if you want to follow along, but then you can just download it and do npm run dev or npm run dev, whatever you're using, and get this up and running on localhost 4321. All right, so I've got that going. Let's think through what we're going to need. We're going to do this in 3 stages. First of all, we're going to go ahead and update our CSS file right here, so it'll actually reflect what we want this to look like in the future for theming. All right. Secondly, we're going to add some toggle switches. We'll do that down here in the footer, and that will switch us between light mode, dark mode, and our system mode. Now you can add additional themes the way we're going to set this up, so you can have as many themes as you want and style that however you'd like. Thirdly, we're going to load this using our window event listener. So as it loads, it'll then look for the theme and then update the kind of the styling. Now we'll see that flash of death, which is what we're going to do fourthly, and that is to switch to SSR mode and grab all this in a cookie and then use that cookie to load it directly on page request. All right, so let's go ahead and start with this CSS. So by default, you can see they've set all this up to just point to accent, accent dark, light, all this kind of stuff. And then that's being used all throughout the document down below here. Now I still want to use this, but what I want to do is actually have a light mode and a dark mode version. So let's come up here and maybe just to make this easy, let's grab all these right here. We'll just change these all to light mode. So I'm going to say light mode like this, dash whatever. Now that might seem a little bit odd, but then what we're going to do is come down this way and grab all of these. And I'm just using Command D to do that. We're going to remove anything else down this way. Then what we're going to do is basically point these variables that are being used throughout the document by default to this light mode variable up top. So the easiest way is just to grab all of those and then come over here. We'll just say var, and then let's go light mode. And by default, we're going to point it to that. And then we'll go ahead and paste in that accent. Now we don't need a triple right there. So let's grab all those and just move that down to 1. All right, so now you can see they're actually referencing these other variables by default. So everything should work the exact same. Now there's one other thing we should probably do by default, and that would be to set the color scheme property. This color scheme essentially sets things like the scroll bar and the default kind of colors for stuff if you don't happen to have something set up. So we'll set this to light. If I set this to dark, you'll notice that because this doesn't actually set a background color on the default blog, it's actually trying to kind of guess for the browser is trying to guess here. And you can see the scroll bar turns black and all that kind of stuff. So let's switch this back to light mode. Now, I don't want to take up the time to actually set up an entire dark mode from scratch, but what we'll do is just copy all this down, and we're going to make it look ugly, but basically apparent that we're switching, and that's the important thing here. So I'm going to grab all these with Command D once again. We'll set this all to dark mode instead, which is probably not the way I would do this by default, but I would name it this way, but it should work. Then what we'll do is let's go ahead and grab this right here, and let's just, instead of trying to make it look nice, come in here and switch it to whatever we want. And that way, when we eventually switch over to dark mode, you should be able to see that. Now, there's kind of a couple scenarios we want to handle in our CSS here. First of all, if they have their system set to light mode or dark mode. So if it's set to light mode, it'll use this automatically by default. If it's set dark mode, however, we can say media, and this prefers color scheme and dark. So if that's the case, we're going to redeclare the root. We're basically going to drag all this in here like this, down this way. We're going to set all these to the dark mode variants. So let me grab these. Now that we've declared those up top, I can just come in here and say that these should all be dark mode. And I also should change the color scheme down here to dark. All right, just like that. So my system is in dark mode. You can see now it's using all of our ugly colors. And if I come back up here, you can see it's using all these here. So I can switch any of these up. So if, I don't know, 125, whatever that happens to be. I don't think this is being used much, but if I come in here just to make sure it's all working, see how now that will update automatically. All right, now obviously this doesn't look good, but that's not the point. The point is that we've got a light mode and a dark mode kind of preset. By default, we're setting this to the root here. And if they happen to have their system set to light or to dark mode, it will override that default up here. Now there's another scenario, and that would be, what if they've selected something different than their system? So let's say they're in dark mode, but they prefer light mode, or let's say they're in light mode, but they prefer dark mode. What we're going to do is come over here. We're going to add a data attribute. So if I come back over here, I'm going to add something called data theme. You can name it whatever you want. That's just what I happen to name it. And we'll set this to like light or dark or system or whatever. Whatever that's set to will then override all of this, both the default and their preferred default, to whatever they've set it to. So the way we can do that is just by grabbing this right here. Instead of having a media declaration and the root and all this kind of stuff, we're just going to directly kind of on the root, which we're doing directly here with this attribute, set it to data theme equals dark. So if that's the case, then what I want to do is set it to dark mode. So in other words, I might be in light mode. Let me go ahead and switch my machine to light mode here. But if I come over here, you can see that if I go data theme equals dark, then it switches to dark mode, overriding my system default. And this order is important. This has to be below all the kind of defaults and the system stuff. Otherwise, it'll never override it. So we'd want to do the exact same thing here for light mode. So if I came in here, we'll change this to light here. And we're going to change all of these here as well to light mode. So I'll Command D to grab all those, and we'll change those to light mode. Now I also need to change the color scheme down here once again to light. And that way, even if I'm in dark mode, so let's switch my machine there, and I come over here, hopefully this makes sense, data theme equals light. This will now override that CSS and put me back into light mode. Let's go ahead and switch my machine back to light mode and refresh, and we're set off and ready to go. So that's the basic idea of the CSS. Now this is super customizable because now what we can do is just copy this down. If we happen to have a bunch of other ones, so let's say we had like a yo or something like that, then all we'd have to do is come up here and redeclare like a kind of default yo mode, and then point all the variables, these basic variables that are being used, to yo. When we're actually writing the CSS, then we don't have to worry about whether we're writing for dark mode or light mode. All we're going to do is reference our kind of standard variables that will then point to light mode or dark mode. So in this case, it says gray gradient. All it's going to do is come up here and grab whatever gray gradient. If it's under here, this gray gradient will point to the light mode. If it's under here or here, it will point to the dark mode. All right, hopefully that makes sense. That's the first step, is actually setting up the CSS. I've done several tutorials on that, so if you're interested more in that, I'd encourage you to check that out. Now what we want to do is actually create some little toggles down below. So let's go ahead and close this down here. These toggles right here, we're going to just do it kind of in that footer section. So let's grab the footer, and maybe let's just get rid of this right here. And to make this easier on ourselves, let's loop through this. We're going to say themes equals. We'll just have a variety of themes. I guess we should do this in array here. We'll do light and dark and system. All right, then let's go ahead and loop through these down here, and maybe let's put these inside of a div. We'll call this like a theme switcher or something like that. And we'll loop through our themes. We'll map over them, and for each theme, we're going to output some JSX. So I'm wrapping this in parentheses, you can see right here. And then what we're going to do is just say that we want a label. This label doesn't need to point to anywhere because it will actually wrap the input itself. So this label itself, we'll say, is going to show the T, which is the name, so system, light, or dark. And then below here, we'll have an input type of radio. Now these all have to have the same name, theme switcher, and that way it's like a single toggle, theme switcher, so you can't have two selected at the same time. So if I save this, you see they all pop in there. Now let's go ahead and grab this class and do a couple things in the CSS just to make it a little bit nicer. So I'll say theme switcher here, and then let's go ahead and come inside here and we'll say display a flex and gap of like 1 rem or something like that to kind of space them apart. We could justify the content center just to keep it in the center, and maybe we could actually do flex wrap of wrap in case we need that. And then since we've got native nesting now in CSS, why don't we just go ahead and grab the labels inside that theme switcher and just say display of grid, and that should stack them up and down to make it a little bit easier to see. Okay, so a little bit of CSS, mostly just a little bit of HTML right here. Now we also need some kind of identifier here, so probably the easiest thing is just to get an ID off this. So let's go ahead and grab the ID. We'll just name it theme or system or dark, whatever the label happens to be. Now, I don't know how much of this is new to you, but if you're anything like me, when you find out something new like this, you just can't contain it. There's something exciting about actually discovering this and then kind of showing other people. That's why I'm really excited that Skillshare is sponsoring this video. It's built on creators just like myself and others who actually do this for a living. And what they're trying to do is share with you that kind of journey. They're excited about what they've learned and now they want to show you how to do it as well. Now, there's a huge wide variety of topics on Skillshare, everything from illustration to graphic design to photography to UX, UI design. Of course, there's coding as well, productivity. Basically, anything that you could want is on Skillshare. Now, I've used it myself before when I had to create some kind of bumper with After Effects. I was familiar enough with After Effects to do some basic things, but what I really needed was a professional who'd been using it, showing me how they would actually work through their own workflow. That's what I got with Skillshare. Now, I know for a fact that a lot of people who watch this channel are not devs full-time. but maybe you want to dabble in that and you've really wanted to kind of up your game. Skillshare can give you the wide breadth of tools so you can create your own little mini agency. In other words, it's the perfect way to either level up your career or start some kind of new side hustle. Now, if you'll allow me a moment of transparency, I honestly don't feel like I'm a great YouTuber. I enjoy coding, I just happen to record it, but I honestly don't care about the metrics, I don't really care about the storytelling, I just want to code and share my code. However, I know if I got a little bit better at storytelling, the audience could grow and I could actually do more with this. So I'm really interested to check out MKBHD's YouTube Success course. There's almost 83,000 students in this course, and you can see how it wouldn't take long to get through it. And then there's lots of other stuff in the same kind of topic area. So in a few hours, I could really up my game just by checking out several of these Skillshare courses. Now, the first 500 people to use the link in the description will get a free 1-month trial. So check it out below if you're interested. And thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. All right, back to the video. All right, so we've done the second thing, which is adding the HTML. We've even styled it a little bit just because we have to. All right, so let's come down below here and let's go ahead and now figure out how we can actually load that and save it to our cookies as we click and all that kind of stuff. So we're gonna add a script tag down here, which will automatically be created as a module by Astro. And then let's go ahead and grab all those toggles. So we can just say like theme toggles equals document.query selector all. We're gonna select anything that happens to have the name of theme switcher. Now all three of those should have that. That should give me a node list of all of those. Then what we can do here is just say the theme switches or theme toggles, whatever we want to call these. We can say for each of these. We just want to grab that and add an event listener on it. So we'll add an event listener. This will just be a change event, and we'll pass this to something we call change theme. All right, so this function we need to actually write. So let's come up here. We'll say function change theme. This will take in an event. And why don't we just console.log the e.target.id, which should give us the name, light, dark, all that kind of stuff, right? So let's come over here, and if I click light mode or dark mode or system mode, it should actually have console logged that out down here, right? All right, I'm not seeing it, so we must have done something wrong. $10 says it's spelling. Look at that. All right, so if I come back down here, light, dark, now you see all those show there. And I actually have something called Console Ninja that shows you that as well. All right, so that way we don't have to have that open over there. All right, so we're getting the actual theme we want. Now we just need to actually add this to the HTML. Easiest way to do that is with the document.document element. This is essentially the same as the root here, and I can just set an attribute here of data theme, right? That's what we were using. We'll just set that to whatever the e.target.id is, right? So if I come over here and set this to dark, now it should change everything to dark. This is light. This is system, which we don't have anything set up for, which means it'll just use the default CSS, which is whatever my machine happens to be set to, right? All right, so we've got that ready and going, so these work automatically. Now what we want to do is to save this in some way, right? So let's save this as a cookie. So what I'm going to do over here is change this to say handle theme click, and that way we can kind of abstract this out. And we'll come in here and say function, and then handle theme click, and this will take in the event. And then what it will do is it'll pass that down to the change theme right here, right? So this will now just become a theme like this, and this right here will just set to theme. And then I'll simply call change theme, and we'll pass it the e.target.id. So whenever I click on one of these things, it'll come up here, it'll pass the event down here. This will grab the ID and add it as the theme. The theme will then be set to the data theme attribute on the HTML. So light, dark, and system, right? All right, so let's go ahead and type this just so TypeScript doesn't get mad at us. We've got an event here, and then all we're gonna do is grab this event.target.id. We can just wrap here e.target as HTML element .id, and that should be happy now. All right, the other thing we'll get here is this theme. So what I can do is come up here, and let's just maybe grab all these here. And we'll come down below here. You could pass that down as well if you'd like to, but let's just come in here and say type themes equals, and we'll just pass it all of these as options. Now, if you're not using TypeScript, don't worry about it. Basically, all we're saying is it has to be one of these, and if you are using TypeScript, hopefully you know how to do that. All right, so themes right like that. So if we really want to be extra, we can come down here and say the theme is now equal to, and then we'll set this just to e.target, all this kind of stuff right here, right? And then we'll just say this has to be a type of themes. And then what we can do is pass this right here to where this will be our theme. All right, so that's just to make TypeScript happy, and I'm sure there's maybe a cleaner way to do a lot of that, but hopefully that was helpful if you get stuck with that. Okay, so now we've got this handle theme click. It's passing it on here. We know this is a theme, and then it's going to update or change our theme. Now, the reason we abstracted that is so we could also have another function here called save theme. And here we're going to also pass it the theme, right? And so let's come in here and say function save theme. And this will get a theme, which will be of a type of themes. Now we actually want to save this as a cookie, right? We mentioned that because we can actually load that with SSR before the page gets sent back from the server. And that way we don't get the flash of death. So let's go ahead and make this equal to, in backticks, theme equals whatever theme we've passed in. Now there's more we'll add here in a second, but if I come over here, let's go ahead and open this up. We'll go to the application and go to the cookies. And right now I'm just going to delete anything that's in there. If I come back over here now, this should actually pass that to it, right? Because as soon as we run that, we're going to actually save the theme, which then grabs the theme and adds it as a cookie. So if I come down here and I click dark, you'll notice it changes the UI. But more importantly, when I refresh, and you do have to refresh here, you'll see theme equals dark. Now notice that this expires with the session. So in other words, it'll actually just like be gone when I'm done with this session. So I actually want to store it for a certain length of time, and you can do that in a couple of different ways. But let's go ahead and just kind of write a little function that will do that for us. So let's go ahead and grab the date. So we'll say date equals new date like this, D equals new date, I guess. Then we're going to set the time on that date. So set time. We're going to use the current time of the date, so whatever date it happens to be. So we'll say get time like this. Then we'll just add to it however long we want it to be. So let's say like 365 days. So a whole year, it'll keep this theme, and then you have to reset it after that. All right, you can do this indefinitely too if you want, but just to give you maximum flexibility, I figured I'd show you how to do this. Now, we don't want days, we want milliseconds, because that's what set time takes. So we need to multiply this by however many milliseconds are in a day. And that's how many there are. If you calculate that by 60 times 60 times 24 times all this stuff, all right? That's what you're going to get. So we're going to set the time on this variable D. That will be our date. Then what we're going to do is we want to actually set this up as a UTC string. That's how it takes it in here. So we'll here add a semicolon first of all, and then we'll add expires. And this will be equal to that D that's been now set as a new time, 365 days from this exact millisecond to UTC string like this. Now, if I come back over here and I click light, you'll notice something. If I refresh, not only has it updated, but the session here should actually be updated to the full amount. Let's just make sure I did that correctly. Aha, expires. Spelling once again, not my friend today. Let's refresh. And now you see I actually have an expiration date that's 365 days from right now. All right, hopefully that makes sense kind of why we're doing what we're doing here. So we've updated our CSS to account for multiple themes. We've now added toggles. And then thirdly, what we've done is go ahead and handle the click event and actually saving the theme. Now we need to load the theme. Let's first of all do it kind of the traditional way, and then we'll use server-side logic. So the traditional way would be to grab the window.add event listener. And here we're going to listen for DOMContentLoaded. And then whenever it loads here, what we want to do is grab that cookie and match on the string theme equals whatever. Then we'll grab that theme and we'll change the actual HTML. So first of all, let's grab the cookies. So we'll say const cookies equals document.cookie. And just so we can see what's going on, let's console log this. And again, Console Ninja will give this to me so you can see I'm getting a string, that says theme equals dark. Now, if I have multiple cookies, we'll actually append all of those one after the other. So what we want to do is do some regex to just find that exact string, theme equals whatever it happens to be. So regex is just a way of searching. So what I can do is come in here and we can say const match equals, we'll say cookies.match. Then we're just going to pass in a regex string. This would be theme equals. And what we want to do is capture inside of parentheses here, this. So anything like this until we hit a semicolon. We'll do plus here, so it'll grab anything and then close this out. So now what I can do is just match on this. And when I load the window, you'll see that I'm getting a bunch of things in an array. I'm getting the whole string. I'm getting that matched item of dark, and then a couple other things like the index, the input, the groups, all that kind of stuff. So what we're going to do is we want the second item in that array, but only if it exists. So it may be that they have not yet set up these cookies. They haven't clicked any of these. So it may be that theme equals whatever isn't there at all. So let's check on that. So we'll set let theme equals system by default, and then we can update that if they happen to have anything that's matched. So we'll say if there is a match, then what we're going to do is go ahead and update the theme to be equal to match, and remember it was in the second position in that array. Then down here, we're just going to say change theme, and this will be our theme, right? It'll either be system right here, if that's what it happens to be, or this matched keyword. Now to make TypeScript happy, we can come in here and say as themes, and then it's just doing a type declaration where it has to be one of those items, which will either be system or whatever theme that we've inputted there. So you can do that if you want. Now we haven't yet handled the toggling here where it actually shows on page load which one is selected. You can do that in a couple different ways, but probably what you would do is basically grab the theme, then do a query lookup for the actual ID of dark or light or whatever, and then just set that to checked of true. Now, because we're going to be using SSR here in a second, we don't need to do that. We can actually just grab it directly from the top level here of the document right up here and figure out what the theme is and then check it based off that. All right, so that's how we typically do it. You can see here, though, if I refresh, we get this screen of death, right? That little flash moment, which is really frustrating. So how do we get rid of that? Well, that's where kind of the point of this tutorial comes in, and that is using SSR. So I'm going to go ahead and come down here in the terminal. We're going to add with PMPX, Astro add, and there's a bunch of different adapters for SSR. I'm just going to use Netlify, and it will actually walk us through installing all this. So let's open this up just so we can see it a little bit easier, because it'll not only install it for us, it will also add it to our config. So it's asking to install that. I'll say yes. Now it's going to update our Astro config. So I'll say yes again. And then finally, let's get this thing back up and running with pnpm run dev. And just so we can see what it's done, let's go ahead and open up the Astro config file, and you can see it's added both of these items here. Now with either the server or the hybrid mode, which I won't get into the details here, but there's a video linked in the description if I can remember that explains the differences between those, you can basically get access to cookies on page request. Those cookies then are how we're going to update both the UI right here, including down here, and also avoid that flash of death. So let's go ahead and close this down, and let's do a couple things. First of all, we need to actually set the theme on page load, right? We're not going to use that event listener down here anymore. So in fact, I'll just go ahead and comment this out. So we're not even tempted with it, all right? We'll just get rid of that altogether. We don't have to do all this weird matching thing. We actually get some nice helpers from Astro to handle that ourselves. So let's go ahead and open up the index page. And I think the way they have this set up, yeah, it's just like hard coded here, which is not the greatest idea. Usually you want some kind of wrapper, so you only have to do this in one place. But since we need to set the data theme right here, I'm just going to do it right up top here. So Astro gives us some nice helpers in SSR mode. What we're going to do is set the theme variable, which will just be a variable I set up here, to Astro.cookies. Now this gives us getter and setter options. So we'll say get, and what we're going to do is get the theme. Now, just to see what we're getting back here, let's go ahead and console log this. You'll see that if I hover here, it'll show me that I'm getting an object here that has value equals dark. So what I actually want here is if something comes back, so I'll do a question mark dot, then I want the value. Now this could also be undefined, right? So if I don't happen to have anything, it'll be undefined. If I do, it'll just give me that string back, right? So let's say that if it's undefined or null, then I just want it to give me back system. That means I know that theme here will either be dark mode, light mode, or system mode, either from here or that's because what it's been set in the cookies. Now, it really is that easy. All I have to do now is come down to this HTML tag and just set data theme equal to whatever that theme happens to be. And now if it's in dark mode, no more flash of death. I can refresh as long as I want. It'll actually be updated automatically. Now there's one more thing we need to do, and that is to set the dark right here as well. So let's come in here and let's jump over here to the footer. So what we're going to do is say the same thing here. We want to get the theme, and all we want to do is set the checked here to if the theme is equal to the T, right? Which is the actual looped item, which would be either light mode, dark mode, or system mode. Now, as soon as I save it, you'll notice that dark is already checked automatically. I can come over here to light, that will both update the UI, and then if I refresh, we won't get the flash of death, right? It's already there and set up and ready to go. System, same kind of thing. Now, just to make sure this is truly working, if I come back over this way and get the application and get rid of that, it should just use my system mode by default, right? And it does, right? And then I can come over here, hit dark. Now it saves that as well. No more flash of death, using cookies, using SSR. Now, again, if you're used to Astro, you may know that you can come in here and change this. Instead of server, you can change this to a hybrid mode. Hybrid will essentially use static site generation by default, and then you can mark individual pages as SSR. And my system is in light mode right now, but if I refresh, you see I still don't get the flash of death. So even though like most pages are built statically, this hybrid mode allows you still to get access to those cookies everywhere because you're using a server-side rendered kind of method, even if the individual route isn't server-side rendered. So there's a full theme switcher that ensures that your users get whatever theme that they expect. No flash of death, they get exactly what they expect as soon as they load your site. Well, thanks so much for watching. Thanks again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Happy coding.